Good morning, everyone. I am Tim U. Gibson, and I'm serving as your designated federal official to the United States Environmental Protection Agency, Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act Scientific Advisory Panel. For this meeting, this is day 3. For this meeting, in my role, I'll be opening this meeting, the third day of the public meeting on EPA's examination of the microsome mesocosm studies for evaluating the effects of atrazine on aquatic plant communities. I'd like to repeat that FIFRA SAP meetings are subject to all FACA requirements, which includes open meetings, timely public notice of meetings, and document availability to the public. All documents are available to the public in the docket at regulations.gov. As a reminder, this meeting is being webcasted, transcribed, and recorded. A live stream of today's meeting is available on YouTube. You'll see the link on the FIFRA SAP website. As for the meetings that we had yesterday and the day before, those links are there as well. I would like to thank the chair, Dr. Chapin, for chairing yesterday's session, and to the panel members and ad hoc reviewers for responding to charge questions 1 through 6. And now I hand it over to the chair, Dr. Chapin.
Thank you very much, Tamu. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for your work so far. So we'll run through let each of the panelists identify themselves, and then EPA has an opening statement that they'd like to make, and then we'll dive back into the charge questions. So I'm Bob Chapin, retired reproductive toxicologist. Dr. Barakal.
Hi, present.
Dr. Harry.
Present.
Okay. Dr. Murphy.
Hi, I'm here.
Wonderful. Dr. Sabo Atwood.
Present.
Wonderful. Dr. Trong. There she is.
Present.
Okay. And Dr. Chen.
Present.
Good. Dr. Felsat.
Here.
There he is. Dr. Farrell.
Here.
Wonderful. Dr. Getzinger.
Here.
Wonderful. Dr. Hager.
Present.
Wonderful. Dr. Madsen.
Here.
Dr. Marlborough. Saw him.
Here.
Dr. Schmidt. Dr. Schmidt. We'll come back to him. And Dr. Sibley.
Present.
Wonderful. So Dr. Schmidt, I presume, will be joining us. Dr. Schmidt, is he here yet? Not yet. Okay. So my understanding is that our agency colleagues would like to make an introductory set of statements, and so I'll turn things over to them now to have them tell us what they want to tell us.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Lowett. There was great discussion on these studies yesterday, including a lot of discussion about uncertainties. We just wanted to say that we're in complete agreement that these studies have warts. And we just wanted to take this opportunity to reiterate for context that the database, which these studies might be included in, collectively provide insight into the effects of atrazine at the aquatic plant community level. In contrast to the specific standards established for laboratory test guidelines on individual species, greater flexibility can be given to atrazine cosm studies. This flexibility has been appropriate because the atrazine cosm database is not intended to represent toxicity to a specific organism or a specific community under specific conditions. Rather, the COSM database is intended to capture as much environmental variability as possible, given the intent to protect aquatic plant communities at a national level. Therefore, the atrazine COSM studies were only excluded if they didn't meet EPA's scientific validity criteria that were derived from peer-reviewed criteria, or if they had considerable uncertainty about atrazine being the causal mechanism of any observed effects. We are very much looking for a consistent handling of the uncertainties in these studies across the charge questions, and we're requesting that this is reflected in the meeting minutes. Thank you, and we look forward to the remaining discussions today and your report. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Dr. Lowett. Okay. Let's see. So I understand there was plenty of activity in the electronic breakout rooms yesterday, which is wonderful. And given that, I thought it might be valuable if we just took a moment to go back quickly through each charge or address each charge question group and find out from the lead discussant for each charge question if there have been what they think of as significant changes to the output or the answers for that question based on those discussions. So I'll just go down the lead discussants and ask them if there's anything that they want to tweak about their responses to the questions. So for charge question 1, which is about the decision to exclude the Lampert study, Dr. Barakal, did you guys change anything yesterday as a result of any discussions that you had?
We actually did not have any discussion, but I think we were unanimous on the decision to exclude the Lampert study. The only point I wanted to make was when I read out the summary from all the panel members, I excluded details, and I wanted to clarify whether those more detailed calculation could be included in the report, or they have to be said publicly. They were just like supplements to support the statement that one panel member had made.
Yeah, you referenced this in this meeting so that you can include it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's all. But yes, we didn't have any meeting because I didn't feel there was anything to iron out.
Great. Okay. Question number 2, Dr. Murphy.
We didn't meet yesterday, but yesterday we were sort of unanimous anyway. And so I think we stay where we're at. So thank you.
I love it when you talk like that. Okay. Question number 3, Dr. Chen. Any changes?
Yes, actually we did meet yesterday, and because we did have something to iron out. Of course, I apologize. I didn't really get it done probably yesterday during the first time. I'm a rookie to this thing, but fortunately I'm shameless. So here we are again. So, okay. Yeah, so based on the discussion and also based on what we already had from the comments that I received earlier from our members, we have concluded the following. So all members in the panel, we are in agreement that we support EPA's decision to remove those 4 endpoints, number 1, number 5, number 41, and number 42. Because they no longer satisfy the criteria for the inclusion of the database, be it either duration of the test, a requirement for replicates, particularly if they're also important for statistical analysis, and also they don't really fit in the goal of EPA's, they don't really fit in EPA's goal of having one endpoint per experiment. So the panel still have disagreement on the remaining 2 endpoints, number 2 and number 4. One member maintains that those 2 endpoints should probably still be included. 3 other members are in agreement that those 2 endpoints should also be removed. And 2 of the 3 members did not really actually directly comment on the scoring of those 2 endpoints, the effect, no effect scoring. But rather made general comments, on the overall quality or the validity of the study. So one member actually recommended against, I think the word is, this study is overall probably should not be included in the database. The other member did not really explicitly object the inclusion of the study, but did raise a very serious concern about the value of the study and the utility of the study if it was indeed included in the database. So the final member actually did comment on the scoring of the endpoints, but this member also had additional concern on the validity of the data and actually objected to drawing conclusions based on these data. So the concern of the study mostly is on the design of the study and execution of the study. For example, there's no proper control, there's no proper replicates. This was voiced by two of the members. And also in terms of the effect, there's lack of control. For example, the effects are observed in the macrophage community, but there's lack of control of macrophage or lack of information, at least the status of the macrophage at the initiation of the test, where and this is also voiced by two members of the panel. So that's that kind of make it probably almost impossible to really evaluate the effect from the macrophage at the end of the initiation. So that's what I have here. So overall, we have three members. In principle, agrees that the endpoints should probably not be included in the database. We have one member have some reservations on excluding the final two endpoints. And if there's any other additional comments from the members, I think they can probably just jump in if they like. So.
Okay. All right, that works for me. Let me see. Let me ask our EPA colleagues if that kind of response is useful for you, or does that give you what you want, or do we need to keep working at this one?
And there's a pause because EPA is
they're having this.
Internal discussions.
They're having those discussions.
Yeah, for the public to.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Kayla Colson, EPA. We appreciate that response. Can we just ensure that that is captured in the meeting minutes in terms of the difference of the panel members?
Yes, that will be captured in the report.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Chen, and thanks for chewing on that gravel for us. Question number 4, lead discussant was Dr. Sibley.
Yes, we also did not meet yesterday, but as you recall from the commentary, we were unanimous, had reached consensus that the EPA's recommendation to remove this study was a valid one. So we have, as far as I'm aware, I've received no other commentary. So as far as I know, that stands.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. Question number 5, Dr. Hager. Any changes or tweaks?
Oh, the panel members did not have any further conversation yesterday after we had presented the comments. Again, we had 5 responses from panel members, 3 of which specifically recommended that this trial be excluded from further consideration in the COSM database, and 2 members were silent on any type of recommendation like that.
Okay, great. Let's see, question number 6, Dr. Harry.
Yes, we did meet yesterday in the breakout room. It was very helpful for us to go over, one, to go over the question, and then to go over how our response to that. In general, I don't think we're changing what we said yesterday. We're comfortable with the one endpoint. It seems logical that those 2 manuscripts are really 2 endpoints from one experiment. So clustering them together fits with what EPA, has sort of set as their framework. We are fine with their call. Yes, we're fine with their call of no effect. I think we're going to be back and forth about whether we're comfortable on the other one. I think as we all went through this a little more, we had even more hesitation about the lack of detail, but also the lack of the actual data and the group variance and the information that was provided in the manuscripts. I think we thought EPA was being cautious by accepting the 30 micrograms per liter as having an effect. We found some caveats, but we mentioned them yesterday. So I think we're pretty much on the, pretty much exactly where we were yesterday. We just had to work out keeping the scientist hat on, but keeping the focus of the question in front of us.
Right. Always a challenge. Okay, great. Thank you very much. So that brings us up to our first time through question number 7. So I'll call on Dr. Marlborough, the lead discussant, to present that group's conclusions or report so far.
Okay, so do we, so we're not going to put up a slide with what the question is?
I'm sorry, excuse me. I just got a note
I
that
get it wrong.
EPA, has their hand up raised.
Oh, I missed that. Sorry.
Yeah, so I apologize. I didn't see it.
Hi, on question 5, I think Dr. Hager said that 3 panelists wanted to exclude the study and 2 were silent. EPA would appreciate if the 2 that were silent would go on the record in the report on whether they think the study should be included or excluded.
That's
Thank you.
good. All right, so that gives Dr. Hager a little homework.
Yes, we will certainly follow up on that. Thank you.
Cool, thanks.
All right, great. Thank you.
Okay, back to Dr. Marlborough.
Yes.
Okay, so this is question 7, which is comment
Oh.
on EPA's decision. Oh, good.
I'm sorry, I screwed up again. So Ms. Joyce is going to read the question for us.
Let's see, is the room muted? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Awesome. All right.
Yes.
Jessica Joyce, EPA, question number 7. Please comment on EPA's decision to include the 2002 Seguin study and make no changes to the no effect conclusions for the single included endpoint. Thank you.
Third time's the charm, Dr. Marlborough.
Okay, so the basic on this is that we had 4 individuals who agreed with accepting with with some issues we know already with the studies. One of the members, their report sent didn't really give a recommendation either for or against, or whether or not to remove the study altogether. What I'd like to say on this is that I know from EPA's perspective, there's kind of a significant creep in what it is that we're asked to evaluate and look at. And I think this kind of happens because when you gather a group of scientists together to review endpoints or data points from various studies, there are times where we might say, okay, well, EPA has reviewed these. They want a specific answer to a specific question. And our agreement in this is that, we may say affirmative to a study or the endpoint, even though we don't think that the study is very strong on its merits. And so, we don't want to, in a sense, our approval be overlapped with an approval of the study methodology or the reporting. To jump through some of the highlights, specifics, obviously this study was set up similarly to the 2001 A and B. And so there was some deficiencies there. There were questions on the solvents that were used and whether or not there were certain effects. Some of the individual statements focusing on study design, that there was not enough information in the base study design. And so they lacked a certain level of detail and transparency in the experimental method, which would not allow other researchers to replicate it. And so that was some of the issues with the study. Some of the conclusions are made in the absence of appropriate statistical analysis. And so, the assumption is that's little more than opinion. And then whether or not the data trends, since they're listed as, someone specifically looking at these and noticed the trend versus would someone else see the same trend, which is why statistics are important in this. Let's see. Another main concern that we had a discussion when we met in kind of a small group yesterday was, and I understand that in the evaluation of these studies, we're really not looking at the statistics. We're looking at the, the trend and the evaluation. But one of the things noted was that there's a non-standard benchmark of 0.1 instead of 0.05. While, not to get into an ad hominem argument, it's odd that the authors chose to reduce the probability standard operating practice of 0.05 to 0.1 to make their conclusions. One of our participants noticed that there was an oddity in the controls after day 11, where there was a massive increase in cyanobacteria in the control, where it wasn't seen in the previous study. So if this is all set up in a similar manner, the previous study did not have that massive increase and actually didn't show very much cyanobacteria in that. And there was a question on whether or not that might actually impact the endpoint data. I think that's all of the individual differences in opinions in that. But like I said, I'd like to reaffirm that 4 of our members were for the inclusion, given certain reservations, and 1 member did not specifically state for or against. They just gave a synopsis of the issues associated with what points they were looking at reviewing, the use of the Bray-Curtis similarity index. So I would leave it up to the other members if they would like to speak further on specifics from their evaluation, because I don't want to go overboard into detail, as they may have an interest in speaking up for themselves.
Okay, thank you. One thing I can tell that our agency colleagues would appreciate is if you could lean on that silent member a little bit and get them to explicitly weigh in about yes or no on the conclusion. That would be helpful.
Yes, the main thing is everyone else specifically stated that they were in agreement with inclusion based on EPA's criteria and the evaluation of the study. But one person did not specifically state it, and so I don't want to say that that's an inclusion.
Okay, and that's fine. I think it's going to be more helpful for the agency if we can either explicitly state yes or explicitly state no. And so if you can just follow up with that person, that would be wonderful, please, and thank you. All right, we'll go through the associate discussants. Dr. Felside.
So I'm probably the person. The reason why I didn't make, I analogize this process to when I served on the Provost Promotion and Tenure Advisory Committee, where you don't make a recommendation. What you say is the strengths and weaknesses. So what I did is I looked at the table at the end of the chapter, table 8.2, as to EPA's concise statements as to why they thought it represented an effect. And so I said, okay, let's take each of those and see if there's an alternative hypothesis that would explain that. So one of the first things I did was focus on community change. So my understanding and questioning from the other day is that change is considered an effect. You don't have to assign an adjective of adverse or otherwise to it. So I said, okay, that's fine for community structure. But I pointed out that the problem in interpretation of that as a change is that in the controls, you had this explosion of cyanobacteria starting a little bit on day 9, then 11, and then really took off on day 16 after dosing. So the problem with these mesocosms and really basically the lack of sufficient replication is that as soon as you enclose something, you have actually changed that system. And nonlinear dynamic theory means that you don't actually know where that system is going to end up. And it may not be the stressor that you think. It could be something that you can't measure. So the fact that the cyanobacteria blew up, I wanted to point out that that makes the Bray-Curtis index a lot less useful in interpreting that as a change. I pointed out the statistical stuff. We did discuss that yesterday. I just find that odd. All of a sudden you do that. But the reason why that's important, because if you show the graph of, I think it was a graph of Bray index over time, and you look at the actual absolute size of the bars, they're very, very small, but yet there's statistical significance they assign to that. And that's all because you use a 0.1 alpha rather than a 0.05. So, but you know, we've argued about whether the Fisher's probability P is meaningful and all that. Yeah, we don't need to get into that. It's just that I want EPA scientists to understand that there are alternative explanations for what you're seeing that make this, in my mind, less definitive to conclude there's an effect. The other thing was the oxygen concentration. You measured it. EPA scientists said, well, it dropped by 20%. You go and you look at the graphs. Yeah, but the oxygen concentration, it went down in the treatment, but then it went back up again, approached the controls, and then it went back down again. Again, I think what you're witnessing is nonlinear dynamic phenomena, because you don't really know what's going on in these isolated mesocosms. They're almost not true replicates when you enclose them like this. This is why when we do lab studies, and I used to do a lot of soil studies, and you have all these flasks and you have to randomize them in your incubators and all that stuff, because you do have these nonlinear dynamic effects. So what I said is, well, there's a lack of context of biological effect here. Just to say that something dropped by 20% oxygen and saturation without actually knowing what that saturation means in terms of the parts per million of oxygen, which is what the community is sensing, I don't see a real thinking about biological significance here, which to me is really what the thing is. So I went in and actually looked at their graph and try to understand what these the saturation levels shown in the graph, percent saturation levels, means in terms of part per million. So I went in and I actually tried to estimate what the parts per million are, and then to look at that relative to the kinds of oxygen levels that say invertebrate or zootaxa need, you know, basal food supply for a lot of fish. You could do it for, you know, other organisms also. And so when I did that 20% drop doesn't really have any biological effect. As a matter of fact, the lowest drop in percent oxygen saturation is to 90% in the treatment, but then it goes back up again, then it goes down. And so there's really, this is not an adverse, I think of oxygen concentration would move from just change into thinking about it, is it an adverse effect on the community? And based on the actual levels of oxygen that I measured, they're well above what a community would need for thriving. EPA did not address in the paper, their fluorescence measurements, which and the authors of the paper themselves concluded that this definitely shows resilience in the community, and the resilience happened pretty shortly after dosing, and that speaks to the health of the community, which I think is what we're interested in, and it shows that there's a lot of functional redundancy in these communities. You have to think about it in this context. As soon as you touch the soil and turn it over or plow it or whatever, you have now perturbed your ecosystem. We're dealing where the highest atrazine concentrations are in the most perturbed environments. These are not natural environments anymore. They've changed. And so you have to look at these changes from these small mesocosm studies in the context of the perturbed environment. These environments have already changed. What we want to know is, have we changed the functional redundancy in these systems such that they're unhealthy systems as opposed to healthy? So I did not say definitively to reject this. I just wanted EPA, because, you know, I mean, EPA is in charge here. They can take our opinions or not take our opinions, but I want them to know that when there's this much alternative hypotheses for what's going on in those systems, that those are actually not good studies that you can actually rely on. And so that's really what I want to know. Now, if you want me to make an opinion here, I'll be the oddball and say, no, I would reject this because I have alternative hypotheses that I think may be just as plausible as saying, oh yeah, there is an effect, period.
Okay, thank you very much for that. While I respect and appreciate, I really, and I'm grateful that I didn't have to carry all the committee burdens that my academic colleagues had to. This is not a provost tenure committee meeting, and our EPA friends would be, I think, my understanding is that the thing that's most helpful to them is clear answers about yes or no. Do you agree with us on this? And should we include this or not? And do you like this effect change? Do you like our conclusions? Do you support our conclusions? And so telling them all the reasoning without giving them a clear yes or no makes it harder for them. So if you could, I'll just ask one more time, if you could give a specific yes or no, you agree, or you could even say, no, I don't agree, this thing shouldn't be in here. Just stating that clearly, I think would be the most help for them.
Yeah, it's one sentence that I could add to the bottom of my little diatribe that I wrote for Sydney and the team. Perfect. And it's no, I don't agree that it should be included.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's see, Dr. Hager, anything to add?
No, I don't have anything further to add. Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Harry, any substantive additions?
Nope, I'm fine with everything been said.
Okay. And Dr. Sabo Atwood, anything to add?
Yeah, the only other point I'll make, which is building off this sort of blow up of the cyanobacteria, was the interpretation of that, which the authors referred to as normal supposed variants in quotes. And so there was a lot of discussion as to, that was, or they interpreted that as normal variability. And I'm not sure there was enough data there to totally support that. So it was a concern of mine that I want to put on the record.
Okay, good. All right. So anybody else on the panel want to weigh in on charge question 7 about the 2002 Seguin study? And I'm not seeing any hands come up. So I'm getting ready to turn to our EPA colleagues and ask if we've done what you asked us to do for charge question 7.
Yes, thank you. That was very good and thoughtful discussion. Thank you.
Great. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of the questions. Are there, I guess, let me just make sure that nobody on the panel has any final additions before I turn this back over to Tamu for thoughts about schedules and deadlines for the next steps. Are there any other scientific issues that need to be addressed or that people want to weigh in on? And I'm not seeing any hands. We've beaten it out of you. Okay, wonderful. All right, Tamu, would you fill us in on what the expectations are and timing for those, please?
All right, great. Just first of all, just want to say thank you. I'll get to more thank yous, but want to have a short administrative meeting to discuss the report writing and timelines. So would like to do that thereafter adjourning the meeting. So just want to make that announcement. Before we get to the adjournments, I just want to ensure that if anyone has any questions, or if EPA, apparently you all don't have any other questions, panel members, you all don't have any final say within the meeting before we go into our report writing process, you must state it in the meeting. So just want to reiterate with the chairperson, Dr. Chapin. If you have anything that you need to state so that we can include into the meeting minutes, we must do that now. Okay, EPA has their hand raised. Yes.
Dr. Lowett, I will say my name this time. Sorry, I forgot last time. We just realized we may have not heard it. So we heard four of the panel members. So in the last charge question,
Okay.
charge question 7, we're in agreement for inclusion and 1 to not include, but we think we missed the panel's opinion on whether there was an effect or not.
Dr. Marlborough?
We may have just missed that, but
So the general opinion of the panel, based on the information that I received, would indicate that 4 of us believe that based on their criteria requested by EPA, that there's an effect for for 4, and 1 doesn't believe the study should be included.
thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to get off of mute. Okay, great. Okay, so I will proceed with closing this meeting. So I would like to thank our chair, Dr. Chapin, for leading us and being the captain of this meeting. So thank you so much. We greatly appreciate your contributions. I also would like to thank the peer review and ethics branch and EPA for preparing for this meeting, including our chief, Steve Knott, and Dr. Kamel, who is my backup DFO. So I thank you, Dr. Kamel, for being there on all 3 days. Would also like to thank Dr. Charlene Madden and Bill Woogie, who are our assistant deputy ethics officials. I also want to thank Joyce Coates and Barbara Yule for the administrative staff, and want to thank the contractor and Dinah for their help in the Zoom meeting preparation and YouTube casting. Thank you to the FIFRA SAP committee members and ad hoc reviewers for their input and participation in the meeting. And thank you to the EPA Deputy Assistant Administrator Jake Lee for his opening remarks. Thanks are also due to the OPP team for presenting their technical presentation and responding to panel members' questions. And I also would like a big thank you to the public for sending their written comments and for presenting their oral comments as well. So we really appreciate the participation for all 3 days. And so we greatly appreciate you all's attention and your time. I again ask that the panel members to stay on the meeting so that we can discuss the report writing process. And we have now closed